Good day to you, my lovelies. Today I have a Hongdian N10 for your consideration. This is Hongdian's foray into the number 8 nib, and I've been waiting for this for a little while, but it did have some postage issues. I may touch on them later. I may not. I may forget. Let's see. Bill's having another day off. He's a lazy bird at the minute. So I've got this little rest, which was actually made by my wife, which is nice. Anyway, pen. So Hongdian N10, which has a Hongdian number 8 sized black coated steel nib and what appears to be an ebonite feed, which is a nice touch. So as I say, I've been waiting for this for a little while. My first order through AliExpress did not materialise, despite saying it had been delivered. So got a refund for that, and then bought another one, which did appear. But it's been a long journey. And I'm just noticing now, as you probably will, that seam on there doesn't line up here. That's annoying. So just noticing now, I'm sure it did at some point, but if you tighten that fully, that doesn't line up. So there's one bugbear straight away. Let's take a quick look around the pen and then we'll talk about it a bit more. So screw cap, as you just saw, unscrews in 1.5, just over 1.5, perhaps 1 3/4. You've got the ink window here and on the other side to see through and see your ink levels when it's not got fluff and stuff in it. But you know, that is something in itself to be aware of. You can catch fluff and stuff in that because that is a tiny bit pronounced there. Piston filling pen, hence the ink window. Piston filling knob, ring before piston filling knob, flat end, clip, stiffish but usable, cap band there with Hongdian N10 on there, and then some ridged knurling pattern, ring of the clip unit up here again. Like you've got that little ridged tactile there, and flat finial. As I say, screw cap, metal threads, which are, the threads themselves are pretty smooth, however that first one does catch a bit there, just going up from this section, something to be aware of, but generally speaking not bad for the smoothness. You got a little flare up for the nib there, and that section is big enough to accommodate my fat fingers, so shouldn't really be an issue unless you really desperately want to hold back up here, but it's not too bad, but something to be aware of. As I say, number 8 sized Hongdian steel nib, black coated, with their nice patterning on there, fine nib. He's only coming to fine at time of recording, and chunky ebonite feed there, which is a nice touch. So the surface material is a weird one. It's ever so slightly, you can hear that. Can you hear that? It's ever so slightly, do you know, like, I don't know where you are in the world, but you used to get like kind of free collector card things in cereal boxes, right? I'm going back a few years, but they had that kind of ridged pattern. If they were like kind of slightly hologram turny jobbies, you know, you turn it a certain angle and it's a character or something and it changes because it's on whatever, had like slight ridged thingy, and you used to go, well, I did, yeah, it's a bit like that. So it's smooth to the touch, and it's got that kind of not hologrammatic, but it will change with the light a little bit. And it's just got that little, it is there, that texture. You don't feel it like this, but is that enough of that? Sorry. So yeah, it's an odd one. I'm not entirely sure I'm convinced that I like the finish on there. I don't know, it feels like it cheapens it a little bit for me. And like up on the piston turning knob there, that's just kind of a matte, I don't know if it's aluminium or something, kind of anodized aluminium feel at any rate. I'd rather it was all that rather than this. Just me. Then you've got that kind of seam there, and as I say, that doesn't line up. I mean, look, you can stop tightening there, but with very little effort it goes a bit further, so that's not great if you've got well, proclivities, shall we say, like I do towards things lining up. So yeah, piston filler. So yeah, I'll be honest, upon finally receiving this, I was a little bit underwhelmed by the finish. Also, just feels a little bit light in the hand for me. It's a good size. I'm going subjective now a little bit, but it's a little bit probably lighter than I'd like. Speaking of lightness and measurements, etc. So length in millimeters, so capped, uncapped and posted. Sorry, incidentally, it will post. It will post onto this ring here pretty much. So it's going to miss the piston turning knob and post onto that ring there, and that is secure. However, that's going to make it long, and there's a bit of weight in that cap there, as you can see, so that does back weight it off the back of your hand a bit, obviously depending on the size of your hands and what not. Weight, so capped, uncapped, and the cap not posted, just the cap. Yeah. So as you can see, the cap itself and the pen body, there's not a massive amount of difference there. So you're putting like 75% of the pen again on the back there if you're posting that. There's a bit of ink in here, so just allow a little bit of play. The barrel actually is 13.4 and to about 13, just before I get to the piston turning ring. And the section is 11.7 up here after the threads, just tapering down to 10.7 before flaring back out there towards the nib. Let's look at some size comparisons. So comparing sizes to some other pens, I've made this a Hongdian Heavy edition. So up here for common-ish frame of reference is a TWSBI Eco. Then we have a Hongdian 1837, a Hongdian N7, a Hongdian N8, a Hongdian N9, a Hongdian N10, a Hongdian N11, a Hongdian N12, a Pelican M1000, a Wingsung 630, and a Leonardo Memento Zero Grande, just so we can see versus the top end of the kind of oversized scale there. So it's a decent sized pen. Sorry, unfocused you there. It's a decent sized pen. Actually just coming in a little bit shorter than the N11, which incidentally is a number 6 size nib. So it's a bit of an odd proportion, perhaps. Just putting that out there. Let's take a closer look at that just for a second. So if we were to look at these two next to each other, they're both relatively new releases. So you've got the N10 and then 11. So once you uncap them, they are different lengths there. Would it be helpful if I hadn't angled it? There we go. So if I line up the bottoms here. Obviously you can see now that they are different sizes, but with the caps on, they're pretty much the same size. Do you need a number 8 on that versus that? I don't know. I mean, the nib looks a little bit out of proportion for the section there, is all I'm saying. Especially up against like a similar sized Hongdian with a number 6 nib and a number 6 black coated nib, just for, you know, common frame of reference. Yeah, up to you. But it does kind of, I don't know. Look, it's a decent sized pen in the hand. But and it certainly doesn't make it a deal breaker for me. But I'd question some of the proportional choices there, shall we say. Shall we see how it writes? So this is Clairefontaine 90 GSM paper, or papier, depending on where you're from. So, should we zoom this in a little tiny bit? There we go. So we have the Hongdian N10 with a number 8 fine steel nib, which is got that black coating on it there. The ink in here is it's Graf von Faber-Castell. Moss green. Silent writing. That little skip there, if my focus will let you see it. Here we go. That was me. I just lifted a little bit. So with black coated nibs, you can get slightly more or different feedback depending on degrees of coating and whatnot, because it coats the tipping as well. That's not to say worse or better, but different and something to be aware of. I find I actually quite like it when it's been done nicely, and this is a really nice bit of feedback you get on here. It's a nice wet nib, so you've got that ebonite feed there. You get a really nice bit of feedback, which I like. So it's a fine, but it's pretty wet. You can, so no pressure. If I just start putting some pressure on there, you can get a bit of line variation out of that, just because you've got quite long tines, so it will give you a bit of variation when pushed, which is nice. Some fast writing. Keeps up, not a problem at all. And for reverse, that is more feedback, dries up, and you've obviously got a bit more coating on the top there than the bottom, so that is another thing. Now, whilst writing and chatting away there, I was rather hoping this would do what it does. but it hasn't yet. So I'm just going to crack on doodling a little bit while I chat. Basically, after I have written this much, generally, a few sentences, few lines, you know, whatever, I have found that I do get rather too much flow. So, I mean, up here is kind of almost perfect for me, flow-wise, from a fine nib with a nice bit of feedback. And, you know, I'm not going to say bouncy, but it'll give you a bit, it's, you know, you don't have to wedge it into the page to get a little bit of extra give there. It's not like bouncy soft or anything like that, but, you know, it's there if you want it. But it then, if I can't get it to, it might actually be low on ink, but basically, I don't know if you can see, let me unlock this focus. So you can, I mean, you can see that the feed's pretty darn saturated there, you know, and I haven't primed it or anything, that's just, that happens, right? Which would be fine, except, and it's not going to do it just because obviously I'm on camera and that's the rules of the world, but it pours out. I mean, literally leaks. So it just comes up, feed oversaturates, and then you end up getting a big blob of ink on your page because it doesn't hold the tension here or anything like that, it just leaks through. So presumably there's something not quite right in the fitting here of the housing and whatnot. So I haven't taken it apart and played with it, purely because I wanted to do this as it came. And it's a bit of a pain because the nib itself, I really love. I really love the feedback. It is smooth. It is very nicely smooth. There's just that hint of feedback, which I have come to like, especially on a fine nib. And as I say, there's that bit of variation if you want. So the nib itself is really, really good. However, there's some issues with either the feed itself or how it's been put together and put in. I think this is a screw-in unit, bear with. It is indeed. So, screw-in nib unit, so you're aware. So yeah, I'm going to take it apart and do a bit of tinkering and see if that flow issue is solvable. I'm sure it's solvable in some way, but whether it's solvable to me, by me or not, I don't know. Anyway, I've rambled a bit there, haven't I? So what do I think? Well, it's quite a mixed bag, really. I'm probably 50-50 on these ink windows. They're subtle, and I don't mind them per se, but I would rather perhaps that they were under a cap. Or, I don't know, maybe a little bit more aesthetical. I don't really like this finish. I would prefer it if it was just the plain kind of anodized feel. Pen in itself, I quite like this size shape. I wouldn't mind the pen body being a little bit heavier, but that's just me. It's a good shape and feel in the hand. That section is comfortable and sits well in my hand, unposted. Not a massive deal breaker, but I don't know. It does seem a tiny bit out of proportion, the nib to the section size. Obviously the nib issues are a pain, but I've chatted about that quite enough. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Feels comfortable in the hand, not massively pleased about the aesthetics for me, and obviously problems with the nib. So I'll have a tinker and I'll see what I can do with it and maybe revisit in the future. Or I'll take that nib off and stick it on something else. Perhaps a Jinhao or a Wing Sung if I can get such a thing to fit. Because I do like the feedback on that particular nib. These are, by the way, available for somewhere between the £20 to £30 ish mark, depending on where you're shopping and what taxes you have to pay. AliExpress, eBay, Amazon, potentially, usual sort of places. So, you know, it's a good deal if it all works properly and it's to your pleasing, but there's some bits there to look out for and be aware of. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Bye.